All right, looks like we've got a big crowd with us today, popular topic, so we'll head right into it. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our webinar today, Is Your Business Ready for Pay Transparency? My name is Alex Smith. I head up marketing at Citation Canada. I'm joined today by my colleague, Michael. He's an expert in all things compensation. Michael, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm the Senior Compensation Consultant here at Citation Canada. I have over 12 years of compensation experience across multiple industries. I specialize in market data analysis, pay equity compliance, and incentive plan design, along with other areas of compensation strategy. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Michael. And just a couple housekeeping things before we get started. We are recording today's session, so we will be sharing that out. If you need to revisit it or share it with your colleagues, should have that in about a day. Feel free to use the Q&A area of Zoom to ask any questions. Please put it in the Q&A versus the chat. You are free to use the chat if you have any technical issues or anything like that. Do let us know. And with that, also just wanted to note we did receive a number of questions during the registration process. So we have a number of questions already lined up for today. We'll get to as many as we can on the line live, and we'll try to follow up as best we can with anything else that we don't get to. Just a quick introduction to Citation Canada. If you're joining us for the first time today, we are a Canadian headquartered software and services company. We specialize in HR and health and safety management and compliance. For over 15 years, we've been helping thousands of businesses across Canada to keep their teams safe, engaged, and set up for success. Our goal is to make it easier for organizations like yours to navigate the complexities of compliance while building great workplaces. And the topic for a great workplace today that we're going to focus on is pay transparency, which I know is a topic of particular interest, especially for businesses in Ontario who will soon need to align their job postings to legislation that is coming into force on January 1st. So Michael's going to get into that change and what you need to know. But even if you're not immediately impacted by legislation, we're also going to get into the positive brand and cultural benefits of being open about your compensation. We'll also talk about some of the best practices that support both compliance and these other benefits for your business. So Michael, why don't we start today with why we're talking about pay transparency?
Thanks, Alex. So we're here because of the upcoming pay transparency legislation. Glassdoor recently shared that over 80% of job seekers are saying salary ranges determine whether or not they apply. This is no longer a nice to have. You could really miss out on talent if you don't have these in your job postings. Ontario's upcoming requirements reflect broader global changes, and forward-thinking organizations are already adapting. Let's dive into what that means for you. So transparency fosters a culture of trust and accountability. When employees understand why they're placed at a specific point within a salary range, they're more likely to feel valued, fairly treated, and committed to staying long-term. Pay transparency also helps reduce wage gaps by shining a light on inconsistencies that might otherwise go unnoticed. Clear ranges make it harder for inequities to persist, ensuring employees are rewarded for their skills and contributions, and not just their ability to bargain. Over time, this leads to greater pay equity across the organization. From a recruitment standpoint, posting salary ranges save time for both employers and candidates. Applicants who aren't comfortable with the range won't need to apply, leaving you with a pool of candidates who are serious about the role. This shortens the hiring cycle and improves efficiency. Externally, transparency also strengthens your employer brand. Value-driven candidates are drawn to organizations that are open and fair. Even if your organization has fewer than 25 employees and isn't required by law to post ranges, adopting transparency positions you competitively against larger organizations that must comply. By matching that standard, you're not only leveling the playing field and attracting top talent, but also send a clear message about your commitment to fairness and clarity.
And of course, you already mentioned some of the requirements, the 25 employees, but if you're in an area where this is legislatively required, it's important that you are compliant, and this will get you there. So Michael, what do business leaders in Ontario need to know about what's coming?
So for leaders, it's important to note that while there are new job posting requirements effective January 1st, today's focus is on the new pay transparency requirements. However, those job posting requirements now include that employers cannot require Canadian experience in postings or applications. If AI is used to screen or assess applicants, they must be disclosed in the posting, and that job postings must also state whether the job is for a new or an existing vacancy. Now, going back to pay transparency that starts January 1st, 2026, all publicly advertised job postings must contain either a specific compensation amount or a compensation range no wider than $50,000. This applies to those with 25 or more employees and most postings, except for roles where the expected compensation exceeds $200,000 annually. Importantly, the definition of wages under the ESA includes not only base salary, but also bonuses, commissions, and other non-discretionary forms of compensation. Be sure your postings reflect the full scope of what's being offered. While it can be a best practice to disclose pay elements beyond regular wages, there's no requirement to do so. It's also important to note that the term publicly advertised job posting means an external posting made available to the general public. However, it does not include general recruitment campaigns without a specific position, general help wanted signs with no specific role, or internal only postings for current employees.
Perfect. That was a really detailed overview, Michael. But this isn't just something that impacts businesses in Ontario, right? So where else have we seen legislation around this?
So we're seeing pay transparency become a growing trend worldwide. Currently in Canada, there are two provinces with similar requirements in BC and PEI. More jurisdictions are implementing similar rules, and if your area hasn't yet adopted them, it's only just a matter of time. Ontario's January 1st, 2026 start date is part of a broader movement, and we can expect other regions to follow suit, creating a consistent expectation for transparency across the board.
And we've got folks from across Canada on the line today, of course. So if they are in an area where this is legislatively required, upcoming in Ontario in particular, what are the risks if you're not compliant?
So the risk of not complying with pay transparency rules in Ontario or PEI can lead to fines under the respective Employment Standards Acts. In BC, this would fall under the Pay Transparency Act. But the risks go well beyond legal penalties. Candidates are quick to flag discrepancies publicly, which can damage your reputation and make it harder to attract top talent. Inside the organization, noncompliance can erode trust, lower morale, and increase turnover when employees see inconsistencies between what stated commitments and actual practices. So while this is about meeting legislative requirements, it's equally about protecting long-term brand trust and showing employees and candidates that fairness and integrity are core values to your culture.
Those are definitely big risks. I'm sure everyone leading a business would be worried about that. But at the same time, employers also have concerns around publicizing the compensation information. So can you walk us through what some of those fears are?
So some of the most common concerns are that employees worry transparency might spark discontent. Existing employees may question their pay if new hires are offered more, while having broad ranges can confuse employees or candidates with increased compensation expectations. The solution? You must communicate compensation expectations early, review salary ranges regularly, and equip managers to have confidential pay conversations. You can include a hiring target caveat in job postings to avoid confusing candidates. I'll have an example on that later. One of the most significant challenges in confronting internal pay equity issues. When employees see new hires are offered similar or higher compensation, it can raise valid concerns about fairness. Organizations should take these concerns seriously and respond with transparency, empathy, and action. I suggest proactively conducting internal pay audits to identify these inconsistencies. To help managers have these conversations, equip managers with clear communication tools and context about how compensation is determined. Provide employees with channels to raise these concerns and be prepared to explain the steps you're taking to correct disparities. Ultimately, how you handle these conversations will define how your work culture is perceived and whether your employees feel valued and heard.
So, what can employers do to feel ready in the face of all these risks and concerns?
The best way to prepare is to start now to get ahead. Start with an internal pay audit to identify any inconsistencies or gaps across roles and departments. Once you have that baseline, revise your salary bands to ensure they are current and competitive. Next, update your job posting templates so that they reflect pay transparency and compliance with the new legislation. It's equally important to equip managers and recruiters with clear tools, training, and talking points so they can answer questions confidently and consistently. Transparency should also extend outward. Make it a central part of your employer brand, helping you attract top talent and build trust with candidates. If your audit reveals that current pay practices fall below market averages, don't panic. There are practical solutions to close that gap over time, such as phase adjustments, targeted increase, or introducing other forms of total rewards. We can support you with the latest market compensation data, tailored to your industry, region, and organization size. This ensures that your pay ranges are competitive, fair, and benchmarked against external standards, giving you both the confidence and compliance with market alignment. Some advice for employers is to develop consistent messaging, is to create standard language that managers and recruiters can use when discussing pay ranges. Align your messaging with your organization values, such as fairness, equity, or competitiveness. It's also important to train your leaders, so equip your managers with answers to the most common employee questions. How are ranges determined? Why is my salary where it is? It's important to anticipate employee reactions. Some staff may compare salaries or raise concerns. Prepare a clear framework for addressing these discussions. Use transparency as an opportunity to highlight how pay practices link to performance, skills, and market data. Embed transparency into your culture. Regularly share how pay ranges are reviewed and adjusted, and communicate this process, whether it's through audits, benchmarking, or equity checks, rather than just the numbers. Leverage transparency externally. So update your job postings to reflect the pay ranges clearly, and promote transparency as a strength in your employer brand to attract candidates who value fairness. It's important to stay proactive. Conduct regular pay audits to identify inequities before they become risk. Also, adjust your policies and processes as the regulations evolve. The key takeaway, though, is pay transparency isn't about compliance. It's a strategic opportunity to build trust, improve retention, and position your organization as a fair and competitive employer.
That's all really great advice. How about some specific tactical best practices when publishing the pay information in job postings?
The best organizations make transparency part of a broader philosophy. They use external benchmarks and ensure internal fairness and tie compensation to measurable contributions and clear paths for advancement. It's important in posting the salary range to have a caveat to manage candidates' expectations. So an example is, this position offers a salary range of X to Y annually. While the full range is posted for transparency, our target hiring rate for this role is typically at the midpoint of the range. The final salary will be based on the candidate's skills, education, and relevant experience as they relate to the role. It's important to consider conducting regular reviews to keep your data and practices credible.
I always love this is what you should do, but of course, what should we avoid doing?
So the key things to avoid are ranges cannot exceed more than $50,000 under the new requirements. And do not promise rapid pay increases to employees unless that's already backed by policy. It's important to first ensure that internal alignment before making any external changes. And please, please do not wait until New Year's to act.
Fantastic. We are going to answer some of those questions starting in a couple minutes. But first, Michael, just what are the key takeaways everyone should walk away with from today's session?
So there are 4 key takeaways I'd like you to take away from today's webinar. Number 1, Ontario's pay transparency requirements come into force January 1st, 2026. Number 2, this isn't just a regulatory update, it's a chance to lead with fairness. Number 3, start auditing and preparing now, as Ontario pay transparency requirement is a catalyst for long overdue improvements. And number four, this is both a compliance requirement and cultural opportunity in how we define and discuss pay. It's important to use this opportunity wisely.
Awesome. So let's get into some specific questions now that have come in. So first is around whether or not they need to comply. So do I need to comply with Ontario's pay transparency laws if I have 20 employees in Ontario and 10 employees in Alberta as of January 1st, 2026? So this is really, is it total number of employees across the business or just those that are in Ontario?
So while the legislation is not clear how the 25 or more employees are calculated, best practices would be to take the total number of employees that you have, regardless of what jurisdiction they're in, to determine whether you must comply with the pay transparency requirements.
Got it. And so do part-time employees count in that employee count as well?
Yes, so all employees, whether it be full-time, part-time, or casual, count in determining whether you meet the 25 or more employees threshold.
Got it. And then a couple more questions around whether this applies to businesses, specific types of businesses in Ontario. So does this apply to nonprofits and registered charities?
Yes, so this rule applies to all employers in Ontario, including nonprofits and registered charities, as long as they meet the employer 25 employee threshold.
Got it. So what about municipal employers as well?
Yes, so municipal and public sector employers are also subject to the same rules.
Got it. Now we're going to move into more about the disclosures themselves and how to do that to comply as well as best practice. So if you offer bonuses, commissions, especially when that's a large chunk of the compensation that an employee would receive, but you can't really put it in a range because it's performance based. So it's all dependent on their productivity and results. How do you put that in the job posting?
Yeah, so under the ESA, you must include salary, hourly wages, commissions, and non-discretionary bonuses. For roles that have high variable earnings, a best practice is to use historical data to estimate a realistic range. Performance-based bonuses don't need to be included, but could also be estimated.
Okay, so if, to comply, it doesn't have to be in there, but if you wanted to make that job perhaps look more attractive than the salary alone might suggest, then you could add in some estimate.
Exactly, yeah.
Perfect. So what if you're ready to post a job and you want to start recruiting, but you haven't finalized the pay range for that role yet? What do you do?
Yeah, so if your range isn't finalized yet, it's best to estimate using any available data that you have and then update the posting once you have finalized that range.
Got it. Now, what about posting just the starting point of the range? Is that allowed and not including an end of the range?
So if you're stating only a starting point for compensation without an upper limit, that does not meet the transparency requirements. It's important to note, though, that this is not the same as identifying a specific compensation amount, which would meet the requirement. And also remember that if your expected compensation exceeds $200,000 annually, it is exempt from the pay transparency requirement.
Right. You had mentioned that in the presentation. So can you just expand a little bit on that 200K exception language?
Yes, so the Act states that number one, the publicly advertised job posting is for a position that has an expected compensation equivalent to more than $200,000 annually. And then number two, the publicly advertised job posting is for a position that has a range of expected compensation that ends at an amount equivalent to more than $200,000 annually.
Got it. Perfect. And then, we talked a lot about Ontario and some other locations where this is legislatively required. What if we have maybe one preferred location, but we are open to receiving remote candidates? Do I need to put the salary information on all job postings for all locations?
So pay transparency legislation is already in place in BC and PEI and will be in place in Ontario as of Jan 1, 2026. So if you're seeking remote candidates that don't live in Ontario, you may still be subject to the pay transparency legislation in that province where one exists. If you're unsure whether the applicant will be from a province that has pay transparency legislation or not, the best practice would be to include the expected compensation or a pay range so that you're not at risk of non-compliance. This also helps give your organization a competitive edge in jurisdictions where pay transparency does not yet exist.
Makes sense. So is there a compensation threshold, like a starting point for where you are legally obligated to disclose salary range?
So it's not necessarily a compensation threshold that determines whether you're legally obligated to disclose a specific amount or range. However, it's more whether or not you have 25 or more employees. So if you meet that requirement, you have an obligation to disclose, unless the role has an expected compensation of over $200,000 as we've discussed.
Perfect. And I think as well, we've had lots of questions come in around pay equity versus pay transparency. So can you just clearly define each of those for us?
So pay transparency is the disclosure of salary or range in job postings to increase openness to candidates, whereas pay equity ensures equal pay for equal work value, and it's aimed at addressing gender wage gaps.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Some additional, you mentioned at the beginning of the session around some of the other requirements that are included in the Ontario legislation that will be coming into force on January 1st, specifically AI disclosures as well. So what are some of the best practices for both salary, for pay transparency, and AI disclosures on public job postings?
So to clarify, you are required to have a clear pay range with a maximum spread less than $50,000. You must disclose any bonus or commission structure in general terms. You must have an explicit AI disclosure outlining its use and limits. Have a vacancy disclosure. So what that means is whether the role is an existing role or a new role. And you also must comply with the ban on requiring Canadian experience. A best practice example to use regarding AI disclosure is as part of our recruitment process, we may use AI tools to screen applicants and assist in evaluating candidate qualifications. All final hiring decisions are made by our recruitment team.
Got it. Now, what about the details in the upcoming legislation regarding responding to applicants who have applied for a position with an agency?
So for applicants through agencies, the public posting rules also apply to postings made by third parties on behalf of employers. So that includes staffing agencies.
Okay, perfect. I think that's all the questions that we'll get through today. I did just also want to quickly talk about how Citation Canada can help. So Michael, you did mention how we can support with that compensation analysis. So that is a consulting project that you can work with our team on a one-time or ongoing basis. Of course, we also still have the platform as well, where you can get job description templates, share policies, make sure that your managers are aware of your policies and how to speak to them, the full HRIS. So all of that is available, and absolutely, Michael will be your expert if you are in need of some help with your compensation review and benchmarking. That would be a great time to reach out and get ready, I think, for next year, especially if you're in Ontario. So with that, thank you, Michael, for all of this great advice and guidance today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll be coming back in a couple weeks, actually, with an Ask Me Anything style format webinar on the Working for Workers Act and some of the other updates that are coming up with that in January and in the new year. So join us again for that. We will be sending out a link to register for it soon. And of course, the recording from today's session will be in your inbox within a day or so. So please share that with your teams as needed. And we're here if you need us. So reach out if there's anything that we can help you with. Thanks so much for attending. Thanks again, Michael.
Thanks, everyone.